Uncover the mystery of Jack the Ripper with us. Join us as we explore the brutal murders, suspects and theories surrounding one of history's most infamous unsolved cases. Get ready to be shocked and captivated as we delve into the dark world of Victorian London's notorious serial killer. It was the summer of 1888 and the streets of Whitechapel, London were filled with the usual hustle and bustle of daily life, but beneath the surface, a dark and sinister force was at work. The residents of the East End were being terrorized by a brutal serial killer known only as Jack the Ripper. The first murder attributed to the Ripper occurred on August 31st, when the body of Mary Ann Nichols was found in Bucks Row. She had been brutally murdered, her throat cut and her abdominal and genital area mutilated. The police were at a loss as to who could have committed such a heinous crime. As the days passed, more bodies were discovered in the streets of Whitechapel. Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes and Mary Jane Kelly were all found brutally murdered, their bodies bearing the same gruesome wounds as Mary Ann Nichols. The killer was clearly getting bolder and the people of Whitechapel were living in fear. The police were under immense pressure to catch the killer, but they had little to go on. The only clues they had were a few vague witness descriptions and some letters that had been sent to the press, purporting to be from the Ripper himself. The letters taunted the police, describing in graphic detail the murders and threatening more killings. As the hunt for Ripper continued, the people of Whitechapel began to suspect that the killer was someone they knew. Rumors began to circulate that the Ripper was a member of the royal family, a doctor or a butcher, but no one had any concrete evidence to support these claims. The Ripper's reign of terror came to an end as suddenly as it began. On November 9th, the body of Mary Jane Kelly was found in her room, murdered in the same brutal manner as the previous victims. But after that, no murders were attributed to Jack the Ripper. The killer seemed to have vanished into thin air. Years passed and the case of Jack the Ripper was never solved. The police had no leads, no suspects and no motive. The people of Whitechapel were left to wonder who could have committed such a heinous crime. But one man, a private investigator named Thomas, was convinced that he knew the identity of the Ripper. He had been working on the case for years, piecing together clues and following leads, and finally he was certain that he had uncovered the truth. Thomas had discovered that the Ripper was a man named John, a wealthy businessman who had lived in Whitechapel at the time of the murders. John had a history of mental illness and a deep-seated hatred of women, particularly prostitutes. He had been seen near the crime scenes on the night of the murders and had been in possession of a knife that matched the wounds on the victims. Thomas presented his evidence to the police, but they were skeptical. They pointed out that there was no concrete evidence linking John to the murders, and they were unwilling to arrest the man on the basis of circumstantial evidence. Determined to bring the Ripper to justice, Thomas decided to take matters into his own hands. He went to John's house and confronted him with the evidence, but John denied any involvement in the murders. As Thomas was leaving, he noticed a piece of paper on John's desk. It was a letter written in the same distinctive handwriting as the letters sent by the Ripper. In a fit of rage, Thomas grabbed the letter and ran out of the house. The letter was taken to the police and it was proved to be by Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper was a serial killer who terrorized the Whitechapel district of London in 1888. He was known for brutally murdering at least 5 women, all of whom were prostitutes. Despite the efforts of the police and the help of famous detective Sherlock Holmes, the killer was never caught and his identity remains unknown. The case is one of the most infamous and unsolved mysteries in history and continues to captivate the public imagination. Jack the Ripper was a pseudonym of an unidentified serial killer who was active in the Whitechapel district of London, England in 1888. The killer is believed to have murdered at least 5 women, all of whom were prostitutes, in a particularly brutal manner. The murders, which took place between August and November 1888, led to widespread panic and a massive manhunt. The victims were all killed similarly, with their throats cut and their abdominal and genital areas mutilated. The killer was never caught, and the identity of the Ripper remains unknown. Many theories have been proposed over the years as to the identity of the Ripper. Some of the most popular include Montague John Drury, a lawyer and a teacher, committed suicide in 1888 and was posthumously accused by an assistant chief constable of being the Ripper. Aaron Kosminski, a Polish immigrant and resident of Whitechapel, was considered a suspect at the time of the murders and was later identified as a possible Ripper by a forensic scientist in the 1990s. Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence, a grandson of Queen Victoria, was rumored to have been involved in the murders due to his alleged association with the victims and his supposed mental instability. However, none of these theories have been conclusively proven, and the identity of Jack the Ripper remains a mystery. The case is considered one of the most famous unsolved criminal cases in history. The legend and mystery surrounding the case have led to countless books, movies, and TV shows about the Ripper and various theories about his identity. The case continues to fascinate people today, and many amateur sluts and ripperologists continue to investigate the murders and try to identify the killer. Some individuals wrote letters or sent gifts to the police or newspapers claiming to be the Ripper, while others may have claimed to have committed the murders in an attempt to gain notoriety or to divert suspicion from themselves. One of the most notable individuals who pretended to be Jack the Ripper was a man named James Maybrick. Maybrick was a Liverpool cotton merchant who, in 1889, was accused by his wife of being the Ripper. His wife, Florence Maybrick, was on trial for poisoning him, and she attempted to use the accusations as part of her defense. Another notable individual was George Chapman, who was a serial killer active around the same time as the Ripper murders. He was convicted of poisoning 3 of his wives, and some ripperologists believe that he may have been the Ripper as well. But there is nothing concrete that ever linked them. So, who was Jack the Ripper? It was the autumn of 1888 and the streets of Whitechapel were buzzing with rumors and theories about the identity of the famous serial killer Jack the Ripper. But little did anyone know the true identity of the killer was none other than the local butcher, Mr. Smith. It all started when business at Mr. Smith's butcher shop was slow and he needed the means to boost sales. He came up with the notion of establishing a fictitious serial killer and spreading tales about his alleged murders throughout the neighborhood. People were now interested in buying meat from the butcher of Whitechapel merely to say they had a link to the famed killer, and the strategy worked like a charm. The cops were baffled because Mr. Smith had meticulously concealed his tracks. He even went so far as to disguise himself with a false mustache and top hat while conducting the murders in order to throw them off his trail. But in the end, his cunning plan was exposed when a gang of detectives discovered that the murders always occurred on days when the butcher shop had an excess of meat to dispose of. As a result, the genuine identity of Jack the Ripper was revealed, much to the delight of the locals, who had a good chuckle at the expense of the unsuspecting visitors who had come to the neighborhood in quest of thrills. The butcher, Mr. Smith, was arrested and charged with, well, nothing really, because technically he didn't actually kill anyone, but he was banned from ever owning a butcher shop again and had to find a new line of work. He ended up opening a little souvenir shop where he sold fake Jack the Ripper memorabilia, and surprisingly, it was quite successful. Truth be told, no one knows Jack the Ripper, and it is creepy to think that somewhere in the world he is peacefully buried in a normal grave under a normal name, and only he knew the secret. Well, thanks for watching.